Hey everybody, welcome back to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for Snap Judgments. It is Tuesday of Penn State week for Ohio State, as you can see by this beautiful graphic that has been updated as Ohio State prepares to head to Happy Valley. That is Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We have heard from Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, and Kevin Wilson again. Got about an hour and a half's worth of information, 90 minutes talking ball. Where should we begin, Bill? I guess it's a Tuesday, so maybe Jackson Smith-Njigba?
Tired of it, man. Let Berm start talking about
Okay,
Jackson.
fine.
I got nothing to say. Nothing has really changed. We know he wants to play. Ryan Day revamped his message. He doubled down, saying, "Hey, this is a kid who's on a pitch count. We're just trying to get him better every week. Expect to see him out there, but maybe not."
I mean, he didn't
say the maybe not part.
Didn't say the maybe not part at all.
I added that.
Didn't say that.
I know, but it just feels weird, right?
Well, it's
felt weird all year, I guess.
no part of it has been normal that we're talking about one player's hamstring for 2 months. That's pretty unusual. Ryan Day did not say that there had been a setback on Saturday. We all saw what happened in the way he left. I asked and tried to get some clarification on if they were looking at something other than the hamstring, which was what it looked like to me. And he said, no, it was a normal evaluation. Jackson tried to ask Ryan Hartline and Ryan Day about going back into the game. That's what we saw him stretching out on the sideline right next to them. So I actually feel like I believed the pitch count story more today than I did on Saturday. Maybe they just practiced it better to deliver it better. I don't know, but yeah. I don't, even with what Kevin Wilson said about it, which is the second week in a row, he's been more pessimistic sounding about it than Ryan Day, which I think is by design, so that he's not the one breaking any news about it. I think Jackson will play again on Saturday, and I think he'll probably also be on a pitch count again.
The one thing that hasn't changed is it's clear he wants to go. He wants to be out there and keep going. So if he's healthy, then he should, and who cares? And we can talk about something else.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to add other than what I said all week. I do believe he was on a pitch count. I also believe that his pitch count ended because something happened and not just because they wanted to take him out of the game.
Right,
but all you can do
go out there and the idea is you're going to throw 30 pitches, but if you give up 3 dingers in the first 7 balls you throw, all of a sudden,
if the guy walks off the mound holding his elbow, like he didn't exactly get to his pitch count the way you thought he would.
But that didn't feel right. Let's just
all you can do is ask, and Austin asked, and they don't have to tell us what was up. I probably think we'll see him. Based on the fact that he tried to go back in against Iowa. But I also think that we're not getting the entire story, but I don't really know if that matters.
I keep going back to that. If he would have walked off the field and thrown down his helmet and, shown some visible frustration and or disgust at the situation, then I would probably view this differently. But I think that it was clear 30 seconds after he walked off the field, he was back trying to get in the game. So I think we can.
Okay. That's Snap Judgment's Jackson Smith-Njigba version. Let's move on to the rest. There's a new show. It's starting right now. And Bill's going to go with what he actually learned about the Buckeyes that he didn't know at noon on Tuesday.
I thought the way they talked about their struggles running the ball was interesting, which basically boiled down to they just didn't feel like they executed enough. It wasn't necessarily something new or different that Iowa was doing, although Iowa did change up their plan a little bit. I just think that they, without being hypercritical of the offensive line, I think they just came out of that game feeling they could have blocked it better, which I buy. Like I don't think there's problems with the run game. I don't think it's like, oh my God, this is like last year they can't run the ball against good defenses when it matters. I do think they've had a really good mix. I think it's been much better this year. I think they played a good defense, and they happened to play like their worst game when they played a good defense. But I think it was more about Ohio State than it was about Iowa. And it seems to me like they feel pretty good about getting that back on track this week against the Penn State defense that got steamrolled by Michigan a few weeks ago.
Do you feel that there's any part of the execution that was affected by maybe not believing that Iowa's defense was as good as it was?
Possibly, yeah.
You go into that game, nobody thought Iowa was going to beat Ohio State by any metric, right? I mean, obviously we knew Iowa couldn't score to begin with. But do you think that maybe it was just like, ho-hum, we'll just go out there and do what we do and not really recognizing that these guys, no one on Iowa's defense came out and said that they're the baddest MFers on the planet leading into the week. So maybe that puts, your antennas aren't up quite as high as they have been against some of the other.
I think it's more of what, we've talked about previously, that once Ohio State got a different look, in our minds or by the highest standard imaginable, you think, well, the next drive, they're going to go out and make a change. Like, it's not necessarily that easy all the time to do that in football. There were a lot of complex analogies about coaching basketball compared to football from Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson today. And you can't, it's more difficult in football to just be like, oh, well, that's what we see. And then the very next drive, we're going to scrap all the game plan that we brought in. Like, Ohio State wanted to run the ball. They expected to get looks that were going to allow them to do that. And once that became very clear that probably wasn't going to be the most effective way to blow out Iowa, then they came back out in the third quarter and picked them apart with the passing attack. It'd be great. We've talked about this with the Notre Dame game or Northwestern in the Big Ten Championship. If, like, in real time, you could scrap everything you wanted to do and make those adjustments live and do it quickly. And, that doesn't seem practical. And I don't think that's going to change for Ryan Day and this team, because eventually they'd have a lot of faith that they're going to get it figured out.
I think that's right. But I also think there are degrees to it too. Like, it's not like they went out and they're like, oh, we only ran the ball for, 120 yards if they're running it for 200 yards the 4 previous weeks. Like, they ran for 66 yards and 2 yards a carry and got, I think it was 4 or 5 tackles for losses. Like, this was in my opinion a little worse than like, oh, we just didn't play well.
Sure.
I think playing better can rectify a lot of it, but it's something that needs to be addressed. Like, Penn State is whatever. They're not very good on the front. They're really good on the back end, so maybe it's going to look better this week. I think it's going to be hard to tell if it's actually better until they play Michigan. It's at 4 weeks from now. 5 weeks
One
from
thing
now.
I think is for sure is that last week was the perfect time for a wake-up call for the offensive line that had spent the previous 2 weeks being told how well they're playing. Mm-hmm. And, we've got Justin Fry statues being built and that kind of stuff. And so I think it was probably a good time to have a down game, because now you eliminate maybe the odds of that happening again as you go through the season.
Yeah, I think it might be informative to hear on Wednesday night when we'll be back in here. Donovan Jackson, I think, is supposed to appear and talk. He got beat on that stunt early on. That's maybe the highest profile. Like, you caused this. Like, Kevin Wilson really didn't beat around the bush. That was his responsibility to pick that up. He took it in too far, and it cost Ohio State 7 points in that game. Donovan Jackson has played at a high level all year. There's not any concern that he can't do it. But as you said, Berm, if that's a wake-up call, you made a mistake and it cost C.J. Stroud a big hit, big shot, a physical shot, and then on the scoreboard it cost the team. So those are the things that will be pointed out. And look, I think we've all seen enough from this Ohio State offensive line to know that they can do it. And if you have one wake-up call or off day or off week, whatever you want to call it, sometimes you have those. The benefit for Ohio State, again, is that they did that in a 44-point win.
Yeah, and the good news is the offensive line should be really healthy since they took 2 weeks off.
Okay. What else did you learn?
The interesting thing, I immediately started to look if Dallin Hayden had played more than 4 games once it was announced on Tuesday that Chip Trayanum is now going to be full-time with the running backs. Hayden has played 6 games, so it's not a redshirt situation. I am curious as to, as they progress, because of the lingering health issues it appears that Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams are experiencing, how much that actually matters down the stretch here for Ohio State. But Chip Trayanum is a very capable running back. He had 1 carry on Saturday, and it was the longest run of the day for Ohio State. So you do know that this kid is not just a stopgap potentially. He's a guy that can be a difference maker back there. And
Ohio State wants to have 4 guys, at least, that it can trust, and it no longer will have one in TC Caffey. He is out for the rest of the season. So I think it was partly Bill and I speculated before the game on Saturday that Mayan Williams didn't look 100%, didn't play 100%. Travion Henderson's been dealing with the foot, but it wasn't just that those 2 guys needed a safety net behind them. It was also because the one who was actually providing it, the walk-on TC Caffey, is that he is out for the year. So we have confirmation of that, and that would put, again, to get to that level of 4 guys that Ohio State really wants to have in the running back stable, they had to borrow from the linebackers to do it.
What do you think they would do? Do I want to say this out loud?
Yeah, you do.
We've seen Dallin Hayden has had to step up earlier in games a couple times. Nothing catastrophic, but it's happened. They face a situation again now that Chip is with the running backs. What do you think they do?
I personally think they probably still lean on Hayden first, but I think it'd be a quick pivot if it's not looking right.
Chip's pretty good. Yeah.
I think we'd start seeing a lot more of the Jackson Smith-Njigba type packages for Emeka Egbuka.
And Xavier Johnson.
And we've seen already that Xavier Johnson can help with that stuff as well. So I think that's probably where the offense would go. But your question is probably a good one to ask if you're talking about the last week of the regular season and trying to get a 3rd and 2. I don't think you want to dress it up and get really crazy that way.
Mine's really...
Maybe CJ Stroud will run it.
Probably not. Should we talk about that? Mine's really good in those situations. I like the idea of now having Chip at your disposal to also use as a battering ram in short yardage, especially in the red zone, where they could have been a little better last week. So it's really nice of them to we need running back help. Who we're gonna turn to? Oh, we have a guy who ran for 1,000 yards in the Pac-12. Okay,
let's just hope the Steel Chambers doesn't have to get called over there next. I mean, at this point, you just don't know what happens.
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. I think we can rule that one out. But
you hope?
No, all right.
You certainly hope so. But yeah, I mean, seeing that the running back depth issue is something we worried about preseason when Evan Pryor went down, and now you just start to see it percolating again. And it is nice to have a player like Chip Trayanum who. I mean, he did not come to Ohio State out of high school because he didn't want to play he didn't want to play linebacker. He went to Arizona State, played well there, decided, you know what, I am okay with being a linebacker, and now here you go, back to running back.
All right, so running down the rest of the injury situations, Bradley Robinson, a right knee, looks, there's no final verdict. I don't think there's a lot of optimism for Ohio State that they will be getting the long snapper back. As I alluded to on the Daily this morning, Cameron Brown has a lower body issue. It is not considered to be long-term. Could potentially play on Saturday against Penn State. My expectation as we stand here right now is that he will not, and that a likely return date for him would be Northwestern. We will see exactly what transpires there, but that's the latest info that I have on the Cameron Brown situation. Jordan Hancock is back. Does not appear like he has any of the pitch count limitations, snap count limitations that maybe Jackson Smith-Njigba does. So we'll see what that means if Cam Brown is out and how much more Jordan Hancock can play. Anybody else that I'm missing who has Taraja Mitchell was suggested that he could be back soon for Ohio State. I don't know if that means Saturday or not at this point, but he's been dealing with that setback for about 6 weeks now. Is there anybody else?
Josh Proctor, Ryan Day said was sick.
Illness, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably it.
I believe he was still out there going through warm-ups on Saturday, unless my mind was playing tricks on me.
Rancivitis or something.
Oh.
Which is hard to get over.
It's going around.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Thorpe Award got it too.
Yeesh.
So you got to be careful. It's very contagious.
Rest up, Thorpe Award.
Yeah. T's and P's to them. All right, that sounds like about everything that we can come up with for some Snappy Jays on a Tuesday. Les Berm's got more jokes.
I don't have any jokes, but I mean, I just thought it was interesting. We are going into a game against Penn State, number 13 in the country. We all agree this will be the best game of the year, probably to this point. I mean, Notre Dame, I don't really even count season opener as a game for this year. Like, it's just kind of weird. And we barely talked about
it's the pre-con.
We barely talked about Penn State today. And barely was asked about Penn State today. There were some questions about the Penn State offensive weapons and what Jim Knowles wants to do with that. But, you know, as you guys talked to Jim Knowles, did you hear anything different or new or you know, I just like listening to that guy talk. But
well, he quoted Aristotle today, so I don't think that's happened in a long time in that room.
I would venture to say it's never happened.
Jim Tressel did used to work in there, so it's possible that he might have.
Jim Tressel and Aristotle were like BFF.
That's right. They go way back.
It's in the winner's manual.
Jim Knowles said the Phillies are going to win the World Series. I think I heard him say that explicitly.
Uh-huh.
No, I don't know if you guys, I feel like maybe Berm and I view the game a little differently than you do, Austin. I think this is going to be a really good test for this defense. I know that Penn State's offensive line has been pretty terrible throughout James Franklin's tenure, but I don't know. I look at a veteran quarterback who can be good. Like his good is pretty good. His bad is also very, very bad.
But his average is pretty average.
But like the skill there,
that might be
I think is something. I think it's something to pay attention to. And and Jim Knowles, I think, seemed to have a heightened urgency going into this game too. So I'm not like worried about it. I'm just like very curious to see what this defense does now that it's like finally playing an offense that has a pulse, because they've not done that yet.
Well, if you think, you know, and Ohio State did this with Jim Knowles and Tim Walton, Ryan Day all talking about going into the off date, making sure that they can be sharper in those 50-50 situations and getting around to finish against wide receivers. Like, all right, for Denzel Burke or Jordan Hancock or J.K. Johnson, like, all right, yeah, I agree. Penn State's wide receivers are going to be a much stiffer test. I'm viewing this, comprehensively for Ohio State, and that pass rush is going to be far too much for Penn State to account for. And I'm seeing a lot more of the bluffs and disguises and different looks, different blitzes from Jim Knowles than we saw earlier in the season. And Tanner McAllister helped point some of that out to me after the game on Saturday. And if that's the case, and Penn State cannot block the defensive front, and you have Sean Clifford, who has been quite generous at times throughout his career with the football, I don't like that matchup for Penn State. Like, obviously they're better than Iowa, but are they good in
that bar's buried under the turf somewhere?
I mean, I don't mean that as the backhanded compliment that it came across as. Like, I watched what they did against Michigan. They're not going to be able to have success against Ohio State's defense in my mind. I have a hard time believing that.
Yeah, to me, it is the first time all year Ohio State is going to play against offensive players that can take it to the house on almost every touch if you let them. Nick Singleton is a different type of player than anyone they've played all year. Braylon Allen is a very good back, but he's not the same sort of burst that Nick Singleton has. Braylon Allen, I know, 75 yards on one carry, but still had 170 yards rushing against Ohio State. So It was not something that's great when you look at how the rest of that game went. He was sort of removed from the game plan early. The wide receivers are guys that can make catches but also finish plays, and that's sort of the area where I'm like, man, if you do let him get back there and have time to throw, Penn State has tight ends that are able to stretch the field. They have players on every level that can make plays. So I just think it's the one game where we're going to see how really improved the Buckeye defense is across the board, finally. And I think it's important to. I'm nervous about it.
You said that. We've made that clear. It's going to be a fun ride over on Friday for that.
I'm nervous about it.
I think, look, it's a curious decision for James Franklin to build and recruit a roster that has great skill players and then completely ignore the offensive line, because it's not a winning
formula on purpose.
Well,
it's just kind of worked out.
I'd like to see the actual blueprint that tells me otherwise.
They have a handful of offensive linemen on their roster that Ohio State offered scholarships to. This is not a team that has just a bunch of schlubs out there. They just have probably not been developed as well as they could have been.
One of their tackles has played pretty well. His name is escaping me, but he's like an NFL guy. But by and large, they're not very good. And that is, this game is always close. Like, there's been a few 1-point games in here, but the lasting memories out of almost every Ohio State-Penn State matchup that Ohio State has won has been, like, eventually Ohio State's defensive line just became way too much for Penn State to handle. Like Joey Bosa, the walk-off sack, all those guys.
Sam Hubbard.
Chasing Trace McSorley in the 2017 game to end that game. Like, Penn State's, like, they had Saquon Barkley, they had Jahan Dotson, they had KJ Hamler. Like, they've always had these guys. And in the end, it hasn't mattered much. So I think it's the right way to view things, but I still think that those weapons are going to test this defense in a way it's not been tested yet.
I don't think it's going to be 100-0, but I don't see Penn State as a realistic threat to actually win the game. So you guys may well be right, and you can say when we travel back from Pennsylvania on Sunday that it was a lot closer than I thought, but that's still several days away. So we'll see if Berm's mind changes by then. It probably won't, but he's locked in. And we're locked in with coverage all week of Ohio State, Penn State. It is a Tuesday. It is Snap Judgments. We'll be back in here tomorrow for some Snap Judgments. We'll also have the Daily on Wednesday morning, probably with some Stock Watch coming out of that win over Iowa. And what else? Buckeye Q. A lot more coming on the podcast throughout the week as we get ready to head over on Friday. That's Bill, Berm. I'm Austin. We'll see you then.